Hey everybody, it's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com here in San Diego, California. Well, I got two special bikes right here, the OG Primavera. So a lot of you modern Vespa people, you know what the Primavera is. It's the modern interpretation of the 50cc or 150cc kind of small frame modern Vespa. Well, it all originated with these two scooters right here, the original Primavera from the mid-60s. So I'm going to talk about these two bikes, show you everything about them. They're both very clean, original examples. The white one being a VMA-1, which is the mid-60s, and then by the 70s, they had the VMA-2 that had some updates. And if you even go further with the Primavera, it goes on to the ET3 that we have an example here as well. So I'm going to do a quick technical overview of these two scooters. This white Primavera belongs to my sister-in-law. She's had it for 25 years now. Ironically, she bought it from a shop up in Escondido, California, which is like a suburb that's north of San Diego, maybe 25, 30 miles. And it was a very odd find. It came through a small motorcycle shop that the owner collected vintage European motorcycles, and he got this from a collection. And included with his scooter was a lot of factory original Vespa tools from the 60s. And we found out the backstory of this scooter. It was owned by a technician that worked on Vespa scooters back in the 60s. So pretty neat little story. It's always been in San Diego, but it's got one other special thing. It's not really ever sold by a Vespa shop like we see today. It was sold by Sears and Roebuck, which is the department store, catalog shopping, kind of has had its heydays, and it's kind of now just a thing of the past. Obviously things like Amazon and Walmart's have stomped over the model that Sears started. I don't know the full history of Sears, but I think it started at the turn of the century in the 1900s, where people in rural America can start with a big thick catalog and you can buy anything you want, including a scooter, all through the 60s. So they had a special partnership with Vespa to import several different models of scooters. Usually they were kind of lower end trims. The Smallframe, which is what both these scooters are, like the name implies, a smaller size scooter. It's kind of a completely different design. The cowls are all integral with the frame. It's the first of that style. They start out with a 50 and a 90cc, and eventually the 125, which we have right here. I think this is a 1967 Sears Primavera, as I like to call it. And they typically came in white when they were sold for the Sears store. They had a unique decal that was different, and they also had a unique taillight that was special for the American market. So what can I tell you about this scooter? It's got the small frame engine, which is a unique motor. It kind of doesn't share any parts with the large frame motor. Rotary valve two-stroke engine, which kind of originates from 1959. So this was like their next series of motor that they engineered at Piaggio in the 60s. It's got a 4-speed if it's the 125. If you're to the 50 or 90, they could be 3 speeds or 4 speeds, depending on the year and the trim. You got the top of the line trim like the SS90. That's going to be a 4-speed, but this the basic Vespa 90 is going to be a 3-speed. Sometimes they even had 9-inch tires or 9-inch wheels on them. The Primaveras and pretty much the vast majority of small frame scooters have 10-inch wheels on them. They're a little bit narrower than the standard vintage Vespa 350-10. They go with a 310 size tire. The cool thing about this scooter is it had a life from the 60s all the way into the 90s, ending with the Vespa ET3, which was the slightly higher performance version of the Primavera. It had an extra transfer port. That's what ET3 means, extra transfer port 3, I think, something like that. So it's got a cylinder, it's a little bit higher performance. It's got a better muffler on it, which is a common upgrade that we do with these older small frames. Put that ET3 style muffler, which ironically looks like the original Super Sport 90, the SS90 muffler as well. It's kind of like a banana shaped muffler. Of course, there's super high performance stuff for these. I'm not going to go into that. This is a 4-speed 125. You're wondering how fast it can go? Probably could just barely kiss, maybe, my guess, about 55 miles an hour, 90 kilometers an hour, somewhere in that range. They handle really, really nice. The weight's a lot more centralized, and the motor's not hanging off the side. I think they're just well-engineered little scooters. I mean, they got a couple pitfalls, like the carburetors tend to want to vibrate off the manifolds, and they tend to be a little more difficult to repair versus the large frame motor, where you have a lot more accessibility to the motor when you pull that removable cowl off. So this thing hasn't run for a while. I'll give it a little blast. There's normally a little pocket under there. I'll show you with the next one. Let's see if it starts right up. So that's what a small frame sounds like. It's kind of got a unique sound to it. As you saw, the lights come right on. You can honk the horn when it's running. And they're just nice little simple scooters. So this mid-60s VMA1, or Sears Allstate 125, on the left side there's not a removable cowl, it's a nice clean look to it. They either had a door that opened, or some of them had a little glove box compartment as found on the ET3. But they all have a door that opens to access the motor right there. So this little door, it's pretty famous for dropping off the scooter and sliding down the road. As you can see, there's a bunch of scratches on it, because this one's probably done that at some point. It's very original in here. All metal tins on it. Later they went to a plastic tin around the cylinder. There's your spark plug right there. So underneath the seat, there's a tab. Normally a VMA1 or a Sears Allstate would have had a double seat. So like a little pad back here, a little spring seat with a metal hatch that opens up. And this scooter does have that part originally. It just happens to be the later bench seats, much more comfortable and practical. So that's why this scooter has been at one point upgraded with an original later VMA2 Primavera seat. So underneath here, you got a carburetor. You can see the choke cable, the fuel rod that connects to the fuel tank. You do have to pre-mix about 2% oil to the fuel. Hence why they have this little bucket right here where you can store an oil bottle and a little mixing cup. So when you're at the gas station, you can easily make that oil mix on the spot. Basic controls on the handlebars. You got your horn, high beam, low beam. You can turn your headlights off. There's no front brake switch. You have to hit the brake pedal to activate the rear brake and the brake light. Some real early or Vespa 50s, they don't even have a brake light. In some markets, it wasn't important to have a brake light. Front brake, it's got these pretty cool looking, wicked, pointy levers, only found on the VMA 1s and many of the other older Vespas. But those things are impalers, they're so sharp, and hence why they got rid of those and went to the lever with a large ball. But it's kind of that cool classic wicked looking pointy lever. Gray grips with the Piaggio symbol. You got the column lock right here, a basic instrumentation, which is your speedometer. This one happens to be in miles per hour, up to 70 miles an hour indicated. In the European markets, the Primavera would have had a 110 kilometer speedo, an odometer. It's got 18,000 miles on this. 4-speed clutch, and the little dots line up when it's in neutral right there. It's got a pretty nice looking little petite headset with this chrome trim around the headlight. You can pop the headlight right out, change the bulb, and you got a basic drum brakes on both the front and rear, pretty small, but they do the job fine for just slower city riding. Not really up to modern standards, but that's what it is. So let's move on to this all original VMA2. It's unrestored, it's pretty much a barn find, as people like to say. Just came out of a warehouse here in California. Hasn't been used for quite a long time. The last tag on the plate is from 1981, so that gives you an idea how long it's been sitting around. And I'll kind of go through everything you could expect with something of this age that's been sitting in a dry barn or warehouse, you know, a lot of people think, oh, you just need to clean the carburetor, it will run just fine. No, it's a lot more than that, I'll tell you that. So let's get right to it. All right, so fast forward 10 years later than that white Primavera, we have a 1976 Primavera VMA2. So it's got some subtle differences. For the most part, the motor's pretty much almost identical. I think they went from a 16mm carb to a 19mm carb in the VMA2, so the performance was upgraded a little bit by going to a larger carburetor. Fortunately, those larger carburetors are retrofittable to the older model. You have stuff like where they started going to plastic. So let's get this cover off, open that right up. All plastic right there. This is still metal, but pretty much the same engine, same gears, same clutch. All that stuff's pretty much identical inside the motor. Got a proper spark plug cap from, I think that's a Bosch spark plug cap that they started using. Still a basic points in condenser ignition system. We ain't gonna start this one because it's been sitting since 1981. And the varnish has just locked up the piston. So that's pretty much why it's here. It's gonna get resurrection, more or less, not a restoration, because it's a beautiful, clean example. I mean, there's some flaws, like it has some, I would like to call them like garage rashes. There's like a kind of, this is dented in. It's probably been sitting in a garage all these years. Who knows how many boxes have fallen on it and stuff like that. Things are loose. But it does have a wonderful set of original 70s accessories, including a barbecue rack. You hardly ever see these on the small frames. It's got a little extra cubby here. Has a windshield that goes with it. We're not gonna put that back on. It's got some swanky mirrors that have quite a dome to them. Pretty crazy. Kind of gives me a weird bird's eye view from behind. When you're wondering about these pods, starting in 1973, for scooters to be imported to North America, they had to have factory turnstiles. So those were added. They're still kind of hanging on there. They're all falling apart like they typically all are. Or in most cases, they've been removed if somebody's kept it on the road. So you can see by 1976, the VMA2, they come with the bench seat. And it's a basic spring seat. Similar tank, and underneath the seat is that little tray I was speaking of. So you have the original toolkit that would have came with the scooter. It's the original Piaggio toolkit. Bet you no one's touched this since 1976. And what does it have in there? The famous Smallframe 3-in-1 wrench. So what can you do with this? It's a close quarter wrench for taking off the spark plug. It's got 11mm socket on one side because the engine case bolts. Not sure why you'd want to take apart the engine, but you could with that. And it's got 13mm to dismantle the wheels. So if you need to take apart your wheels, put a new inner tube on there, you're all set with this tool. Let's see what else is in here. Got an original wooden screwdriver. Ironically, they still give you a screwdriver with the modern Vespas. Not with a wooden handle, but that's pretty cool. And we got two wrenches. Got an 8mm and a 7mm, and that's the two wrenches required to adjust or replace either your shift cables or your clutch cable, or the front brake cable as well. The rear brake need 11mm, or I think you can actually dismantle it with the 13mm, the pinch bolt for the rear brake cable. And with these old scooters, that's something you definitely want to have on you is extra cables if you're going to be doing longer distance. The cables sometimes just fail unexpectedly. It's kind of just the way it goes. And I talked about with that VMA1, there's no automatic mixing of this two-stroke oil since they burned the oil. Well, it's got the original stuff in here. You got a mixing cup. If you're unfamiliar with this, you pretty much put a gallon of gas in here, 4 liters of gas. You find the mark and fill the oil and pour that correct amount of oil into your gas mix, and it gives you that correct approximate 2% mix. I don't know if I want to try this oil, but it's pretty remarkable here. It says Moped Special Duty. This is door lube, 50-to-1. 2-cycle lubricant, not polluting. I don't believe that two-strokes pollute like more than diesels. Smokeless, I don't believe that as well. I'm sure it smokes a lot when you start the scooter. Makes 5 gallons with this little bottle. But there's some pretty remarkable claims with this bottle of oil. This Lubricant Dynamics was a company in Pasadena, California. Ironically, the scooter came from Pasadena because I see the sticker, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But that's California for you in the 70s. Kind of sums it up with this little oil bottle. Pretty cool oil bottle. You can see through it. It's got a graduated scale on the side, so you could actually, mix your oil with it. It even has instructions on the back. So kind of a cool find. Nerding out on weird stuff. I've never seen a bottle like this until I've seen the scooter here. So some of the other subtle differences is the badging changed between the 60s and the 70s. They went to the block Vespa badge in place of the old script. The Sears Allstate's not going to have a script badge, it's going to have a sticker only, but Primavera sold in the rest of the world would have the script Vespa, and it would have had a rectangular Piaggio badge, much like what they have on the modern Vespas. Kind of went back to that classic one, but they changed the casting for this whole horn cover. It's not the casting, but the die, the stamping die for the sheet metal to accommodate this little hex badge that's glued on. They also have this larger horn. I think that's unique for the American market. I got the fender crest, these extra reflectors for the North American market. So if you're into your new Vespa and wonder why there's reflectors, that's something to do with the standards for the United States or North America in general. You can see the levers got a little bit more 70s style with the big ball ends. Here's something you expect with a scooter that's been sitting this long. I can't even pull that brake. It's probably actually just locked up the brake. The grease in all the cables, the brake pivots is just hardened. So all those systems have to be taken apart. And not only have you have issues with the cables, see that steering? It should not be clunking along. So the bearings have completely dry grease, and I have like several detents as I'm turning the steering. It would be pretty difficult to ride this. Another little funky thing that somebody would have did in the 70s, you got the ignition key that's found on these mid-70s and later American market Vespas. It's not really a key, it's just like a little thing, and it allows you to turn the headlight on and off and turn the whole scooter off. You got your column lock right there. But I thought this was funny. This is somebody's craft project. And it looks to be a flannel or with a wool inner jacket. Somebody cut that out, and it has the patch that you find in the back of a flannel coat. So that's something somebody would have made back in the day. Kind of funny. So came with the scooter right here. So you got to have that little key. That's pretty unique for the North American market. They have this fuel lever right here. It's broken actually. It was a plastic lever that kind of shows you what position. That's pretty unique. And moving on to the decals, you got the vehicle identification tags right here. And this is a very common thing that dealerships would have had back in the 70s. My own Rally has a decal from the California dealership that was sold from. So this one's a Pasadena Putt Putt, Triple P. Right there on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. I know right where that is. Still 213 area code. I think it's still 213 in Pasadena if I recall. So kind of pretty cool. I have no history, know nothing about that shop, but it probably existed for some part, some point of time in the 70s. Maybe they made it to the 80s. Vespa in California and North America was pretty much out of here by 1981. So that was the end of an era for shifting scooters. Put a vintage Vespa up on the stand. Pretty much just have to keep your foot on that stand and roll it back. You can see the light switch is a little different on this. Got the high beam, low beam on the left with the horn. And you got the turn signal switch right here. And originally, it does still have it, the kill switch. This actually shuts the motor off. They added that later. 4-speed, just like that 60s one. It's got a little high beam indicator. Pretty much a similar speedometer. This one goes up to 80 miles an hour. Actually, I never knew that they went to the higher miles per hour one. So that's, the speedometer is identical as what's found on my own personal Rally 200 from the mid 70s, kind of same setup. They went to this kind of bunky looking handlebars with this larger headlight rim, and that's actually a sealed beam headlight. That was a standard that was in place for North America back in the day. I'll show you the gem that was with this scooter here. So I see this bag, I could tell that's an old Piaggio part number bag. Man, I don't even want to have dirty hands touching this, but pull this out. Oh, it's the original operation and maintenance manual. So the Vespa 125 Primavera. It's got wonderful illustrations, exploded diagrams of how things work. There's that VMA1 seat that I was speaking of that isn't present. There's the bench seat. So a pretty cool little setup, shows how the steering lot works. They have kind of multiple colors. A cutaway of the engine, talking about the 2% oil mix. They show how to use the European fuel lever, which is found on that Sears Allstate 125 there. How the shifter works, how the fuel cable or how the fuel line's routed with the carburetor, how to change a spare tire with that included tool, how to set the points, aim to headlight, and just doing general basic maintenance on it with some specifications. So that's how an owner's manual was back in the day. There's a wiring diagram to the scooter. It definitely doesn't, this wiring diagram, even though his book is included with this 76, it's not even close. And I'll show you what they did, because they have a battery in this. They got a turn signal, so it's very different. This wiring diagram is actually very close to what's on that 60s scooter. So there's no battery in that wiring diagram, but there's a battery warranty card that was with it. Kind of interesting. So it's pretty cool findings, but I can tell you this manual was originally written in the era when that 60s VMA1 came out. So put that all away. Pretty cool little find with the scooter. Sometimes they did, in the 70s and 80s, they did have a supplemental that talked about the differences for the North American market. So I was talking about, they have this cover right here. This comes right off. I do have to remove this accessory side stand down that the spring doesn't want to seem to stay. I've never seen that side stand accessory ever. Somebody actually painted the bracket blue, and it attaches to where the engine pivot bolt is. So pretty unique. I've seen side stand accessories. We still currently sell them at scooterwest.com for the large frame. Then they bolt where the center stand is. But that's the first I've seen one right there. So we're going to go ahead and pull this cover off and reveal what's underneath here. So this little door right here, it could be storage, but on this model they had to have a battery, and that's an original battery with the felt mat and everything. The strap is long gone. There's a rubber strap that's normally there. That battery's been untouched since the scooter was new. So probably had the new battery. Somebody kept it registered up till 81, and it was parked. You got a turn signal flasher right there. The foam's kind of deteriorating. You got a voltage regulator that's nearly impossible to find because that's a 6-volt voltage regulator. So that's what this little housing covers. I think there's a fuse in there as well. We'll kind of seal that back up. We're going to get this scooter completely running for the customer that brought it in. If I own this, I'd probably just polish it up. It'd be like a garage trophy for me. I don't know, it's pretty cool to have it running, but I kind of know how it runs. To me, it's more of, like I said, a garage trophy. Pretty cool scooter. Thought I'd share that with all of you. I hope you like that. Whether you're into modern Vespas and you don't know much about the history of the vintage Vespas, you might go to our YouTube channel, Vespa Motorsport. I think there's a whole section of all these other vintage Vespas I've reviewed. Everything from the Vespa GL to a Vespa GS, the PX. I think the PX 150, called the last PX 150, that was, did that video back in 2016. It's got like 1 million views. I have one of those in my own personal garage. It's like the last of the Mohicans, the last shifting Vespa that was made by Vespa in Italy. So thanks for watching. Robot here from Vespa Motorsport. See you on the next one.